I'm all alone now, sir.
Jeremy, on the Starship Enterprise, no one is alone. No one.
I don't usually make videos about modern movies or TV. There's so many other YouTube channels for that. But being a Star Trek fan, I felt like I had to weigh in on Picard Season 3. A few weeks ago, on one of my horribly boring live streams, I said this.
I have something to admit. I watched the first 2 or 3 episodes of Star Trek Picard Season 3. And whether you're listening to it live or you listen to this later, I am enjoying Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. Forgive me.
And just a few moments ago, I finished Season 3 of Star Trek Picard. So with as few spoilers as possible, here's my take. Just to preface this, I didn't bother to watch Picard Seasons 1 or 2. I haven't watched Star Trek Discovery, or Strange New Worlds, or whatever that cartoon one's called. Star Trek really ended for me in 2009 when J.J. Abrams' Trek released. I remember hate watching Star Trek Into Darkness in 2013. Into Darkness, boy were those prophetic words. And I've avoided everything Star Trek after that. My decision to abandon the franchise was confirmed by those brave souls who actually watched them and reviewed them on YouTube. To me, it seems New Trek was tinted with hostility towards the old fans of the shows and movies, a smugness about all the changes they were making, and a fundamental misunderstanding of what made Star Trek not just enjoyable, but in a way educational, by the way it presented complex issues as food for thought and debate. It seemed that New Trek was about blowing stuff up and interpersonal conflicts, ham-fisted modern politics pushed in a proselytizing way, instead of being presented as a moral conflict from which a solution would be difficult, but achievable with enough intellect, hard work, and self-discipline. Now, I don't watch Nerdrotic anymore, but I still follow him on Twitter. He posted this on February 16th, saying that Picard Season 3 was actually good. You can see my reaction. And after seeing a couple more people I follow seem to like what they were seeing in Star Trek Picard Season 3, I decided to give it a shot. So since it cost me nothing but bandwidth, and there's not really anything else I'm busy watching, I decided to give it a go with, to be honest, the lowest of expectations. In summary, Picard Season 3 is good. Not great, but good. And without giving away spoilers, the writing is inconsistent at best. There are some things I really enjoyed about it, but ironically, Picard Season 3 cannot escape its past and suffers from the taint of every dump J.J. Abrams and Alex Kurtzman laid in front of us and derided us for not consuming and then thanking them afterwards. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to break this down into pros and cons. We'll start with the pros. Number 1, I really enjoyed the return to those beautiful exterior shots of the starships. A great deal of time was spent in Picard Season 3 showing the scale and the graceful movement of such large vessels. Now, there were some glaring mistakes, but I'll get into that later. Number 2, I really liked how the Next Gen crew went on to have reasonable lives after their series ended. Everyone seemed to continue on the path they were on from when we left them so long ago. Everyone seemed to continue on the path they were on in a believable and realistic manner. Those characters who were stuck in their roles from 30 plus years ago were there for a reason, and it's explained in surprisingly effective writing. And speaking of the Next Gen crew, they played their roles with all the talent and seriousness to task as they did in the series 35 years ago. The only two, and this is not a criticism of Picard Season 3, that got on my nerves were Data and Troy. But the changes to their characters and their acting happened long before this series came out. The one break from character that I enjoyed seeing was these next-gen actors having fun with each other and really acting in this season as old buddies who were reuniting after 30 plus years. Their interactions with each other seem much more personable than I was expecting. And it's some of those back and forth conversations from the actors and characters from Next Gen that really brighten up the show. Speaking of characters, there's one character I want to point out is my next pro, and that's Captain Liam Shaw. He's the captain of the Titan, and he's fantastic. Played by Todd Stashwick as a no-nonsense, gritty, damaged leader, and seems to speak with the voice of those of us in the audience scorned by Star Trek's recent failures. He does not take any shit from any of the returning characters, even Admiral Picard or Admiral Riker. Without giving too much away, there is a scene when Picard and Riker are trying to dupe him with some preposterous story, and his response was no. It feels like he was speaking to the showrunners when they come into his office with their own harebrained ideas of where the series should go or how it should be unnecessarily complicated or preachy. No. Just stop. Next, I like the fact that the members of the bridge crew on the Titan did their jobs and kept their mouths shut for most of the season. This season of this show is not a place for us to be learning too much about new characters, but to homage some of the older characters. It's called Star Trek Picard. I really don't want to know about your wacky idiosyncrasies or your shoehorned in attitude problems. Just do your job, and I'll get to know you along the way, just like in real life. Starfleet was a pseudo-military organization. The young members in this season seem to be a lot more serious about their roles and their jobs, especially the bridge crew. That leaves the more personal conversations and behaviors to the older veteran crew, those who have earned it over the years of us getting to know them. And the last pro I'd say for now, without giving too much away, is overall the plot, the dialogue, and the writing in general was good. Now, I say this as an average score. There were parts that were excellent, and there were parts that were confusing, disappointing, or otherwise preposterous. So, on average, I'm going to call it good. Now let's get into some of the cons, some of the things I didn't like. And this one was a big one for me. I don't mind what most people call fan service. But for the sake of this discussion, I want to define fan service in two ways. There's good fan service, which adheres to canon and the little details of the original material. The plot, the characters, the world the story exists in are reasonable considering what came before. Changes over time, while unavoidable, fall into a range of believability that an audience member can understand and appreciate. Then there's the other side of fan service, the bad side, where bits of information, an image, a character's line, a sound effect, a musical composition are forced into a story purely for the sake of someone saying, "Remember this?" And us being mindless consumers responding, "I remember that." My guess is there is a hope that if you trigger enough memories in the audience, they will grow some sort of connection with your story. But it's weak and unnecessary and can bring down your story, such is the case in Picard Season 3. There is so much fan service crammed in there that is meant to be a callback, and for too much of it, it's completely inappropriate in its timing and intent. I can't say too much without giving away the story, but throughout the season there were times, I have to say at least twice or 3 times per episode, that myself and others watching with me would sarcastically say, "I remember Wrath of Khan," or "I remember the motion picture," when some sound, line of dialogue, or visual would appear on screen. Of all the callbacks and fan service, if I were to quantify them, I would say 60% of it was done well, leaving 40% done poorly. I guess it's too much temptation to resist. Has it been 5 minutes? Better throw in a line of dialogue or we'll lose the elderly Star Trek fans. Has Picard said "make it so" enough? That line, "make it so," has lost all meaning for me. Are you firing torpedoes? Better make sure they sound exactly like the ones from the Wrath of Khan. It's been 35 years since Next Gen and the photon torpedoes have improved dramatically, right? Remember quantum torpedoes? During our viewing, I described the torpedo sound as modern machine guns sounding like muskets. I was called such horrible, horrible names for that defense, but I stand up for my nerdism.
Why you booing me? I'm right.
Another example, the soundtrack, is overall pretty good, but we could not help but notice that it was used like it was an Avengers movie. Worf arrives, play the Klingon theme. We see a starbase, quick, play starbase music. Again, it's a 60-40 split. If they had just stuck with the 60% and not tried to cram in that little bit extra, it would have been so much better. My second complaint. And this one's a bit of a nerdy nitpick. Remember earlier when I said I really liked the ship porn in Picard Season 3? Well, there's some problems with that too. To me, starships were never meant to be fighter craft. Starships, or at least the ones we care about, were more like aircraft carriers or cruisers. Big ships, big cities in space that establish Starfleet's presence without zipping around in close combat such as destroyers or corvettes. There are scenes in Picard Season 3 where giant starships are maneuvering at top speed through obstacles like they were fighter jets. And speaking of scale, the ships grow and shrink depending on the scene. This is likely a result of doing ship designs on a computer instead of relying on physical models. The interiors were shot in dark, grim, depressing fashion. At one point I was asking, how can anyone see what they were supposed to be doing? The interiors were barely lit, and every shot seemed to be at a Dutch angle to add dramatic effect, I guess. It's one of those few holdovers from Kurtzman Trek that really sucks the joy out of even this season of Picard. There's a few more criticisms, but I can't go into them without spoiling major plot points, so I'll leave it there for now. So in summary, am I glad I watched Picard Season 3? Yes. Do I recommend it to those of you like me who have been avoiding any Kurtzman Trek? Yes. For all of its flaws, it was nice to see the crew back together for one more adventure. The new crap, while still there, has been dialed down to a low simmer. It would have been nice if seasons 1 and 2 never existed, but if you think of season 3 as a 35-year reunion special, it does not disappoint. For all the criticism I level at Alex Kurtzman, I must take a moment and give a shout out to Terry Matalas. Matalas? We're going to say Matalas because it sounds like Metallica. The way he righted the ship, no pun intended, is admirable, also no pun intended, considering the excrement he inherited. Kurtzman's and all the other producers' fingerprints are still there, but by not giving the fans the middle finger and showing some reverence for his creation, it paid off. So, will I watch another Terry Matalas project? Even Star Trek? Sure. Will I start watching the other Star Trek shows? Hell no. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to go back to 1964 and finish up my Fistful of Dollars review. Thanks for watching.